Americans want to meet God, believe it or not. Every study I've seen over the last several decades indicate that Americans still believe in God. Atheism is creeping across the face of our planet, but Americans, by and large, still believe in God, and they want to meet God. Jennifer Lawrence, an Oscar-winning actress and part of Hollywood's new crop of rising starlets, is an agnostic. Now, what that means is she doesn't know. She doesn't know if there is a God. She's not sure. She said in an interview, I guess I am spiritual. I'm not religious. I grew up religious. I have a religious family, but I don't believe in anything. I pray. It's just I'm not praying to anybody in specific. Think about that for a minute. Anyway, but I was in a plane that had double engine failure, and I was praying to God whether I believe in Him or not. I was like, I don't know if you're out there, but if you are, please, please, save the plane. Americans want to meet God. We want to believe that there's someone or something out there bigger than us who has our own best interests at heart. Americans want to meet God. In fact, we're here today for that reason. We want to meet God. We're desperate to do so. But I worry that many believers come to church and they're more like Jennifer. Or maybe they're more like a little boy I read about in Sunday school. His Sunday school teacher knew that all the boys and girls were writing letters to Santa Claus. We have all done it. And so she wanted to give them time to write a letter to God. So she took some time out of Sunday school, let them write a letter to God, then asked them to share what they wrote. And one little boy wrote, Dear God, having a great time at church, wish you were here. You feel that way sometimes? God, I'm having a great time at church, seeing all my friends, singing all these familiar songs, being entertained, by the music and by the message, all that sort of thing. Wish you were here. How do we meet God? We've been looking at the Christmas story the last couple of weeks, asking the question, what will you do with Christmas? The shepherds, they followed God. The king, he fought with God. This morning we're going to look at the wise men. So open your Bibles with me to Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2. And as I was studying this text, an idea just kind of almost immediately jumped off the page at me. The wise men, who by the way met God, were determined worshipers. And if we're wondering, how do I meet God? Well, determined worshipers will meet God. So what do determined worshipers do? How does one become a determined worshiper? Well, first of all, determined worshipers overcome obstacles. They overcome obstacles. I've heard a lot of reasons given for not going to church. Usually they're very similar to these. I'm just too busy to go to church. I work 6 days a week, and Sunday's my only day off. Other people will say, I just have too many children to get ready to be at church. Still others, I was up too late last night, so I just didn't feel like getting out of bed, going to church. Still others, and I think this is a fair excuse. In our culture today, our secularizing culture, some people have to work on Sundays. They don't have any choice in the matter. They can't come to church. It all kind of boils down to time. Americans are busy. Busier than ever before. In spite of all of our modern conveniences, we're busy people. I ran across a survey recently that polled Americans, and they discovered some interesting things. 45% of American workers do not feel they get enough free time. 65% are expected to be available after work hours by email or phone. Now, it's often been said, and it's true, pastors are on call 24/7. That's pretty obvious. But many more Americans now have the same situation. Thank you, telephone, cell phone, and email. The average American works 47 hours per week. Now this one's surprising. The average American mother has only 37 minutes of free time in a day. We are busy people. A lot going on. If we want to meet God, I think sooner or later we have to ask ourselves a very important question. And that question is, how important is God? How important is meeting God? Because those things that are important to us are the things we find time to do, are they not? If something matters, we're going to do it. We're going to squeeze in the time in our busy schedules to do that. That's what the wise men did. Look at verse 1 of chapter 2. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" Now, let's clear up a couple things right away. First of all, the Magi were not kings. Yeah, Sam, I know what the song says. Okay? It's been said multiple times. But they were not kings. They worked for kings. They were scholars. They were students of history, students of the stars. They were astrologers who were employed by kings for their wisdom, for their knowledge, for the advice they could give. They were professional people with a job, with families, with bills to pay and mouths to feed. They were busy people. And they took a leave of absence to travel about 750 miles from Babylon or Persia, we're not really told, just in the east, one of those two places. That's where you found Magi. 750 miles to Jerusalem. It was a long walk, a long trip by camel. Very few inns along the way. They would have had to set up their tents, probably some cold, sleepless nights, sleeping on the ground. Probably 3 months, 4 months to get there. And they arrive in Jerusalem, and they're told, well, he's not here. Now, you need to travel 6 more miles down to Bethlehem, down that road to Bethlehem. Now, I don't know about you, but when I've made a long trip, 8-9 hours to go see my kids in Lansing, for example, 13 hours to get to Disney World, the last thing in the world I want to do after I get there is get back in the car and drive 6 more miles. I don't want to do that. But the wise men did that. They overcame all of these obstacles. Why? They were looking for the king. And people who overcome obstacles to come to church, to worship God, same reason. Looking for the king. Well, determined worshipers will overcome obstacles. Determined worshipers also surrender their lives. They surrender their lives. You know, time is a big reason people don't come to church, but there's a bigger reason. Do you know what is the number one reason people give for not coming to church? This probably will not surprise you. The single number one reason, and this has been true for all the years I've been in ministry, this has been the number one reason given in survey after survey. I don't want to go to church. They're just interested in me for my money. Americans have come to the conclusion that the church is a scam designed to separate them from their hard-earned money. And the reasoning is, well, if I give money to the church, I won't have it to spend on me. And I get that. You do too. I mean, come on. We all have financial responsibilities. Erlene and I have had a little more margin since our kids are grown. That's always kind of nice. So we've been giving to some causes over and above our tithes and offerings that we bring to the Lord through Hickory Hollow Baptist. You know, causes we believe in. Not a lot of money, not a lot of causes. But funny thing happens when you do that. I don't know if they sell the information, but we have been inundated with solicitations to worthy causes that we could or would or do believe in. And for the most part, we've had to say no because, there's only so much margin. There's only so much you can give. But so often people, it's about me. I admit it. It's about you. And we say, come on, I have bills to pay. mouths to feed. I have clothes to buy and movies to see, especially in this time of year. The thing is, if we're not careful, we think maybe too much about ourselves. Not enough about God. It's what I want, not what God wants. It's what I expect, not what God expects. It really is, meeting God, it really is about surrender. It's about surrender. And I've often told you, until I surrender my wallet, my checkbook, or until my wife surrenders her credit cards, we've not surrendered to God. Well, why did the wise men come? They overcame all these obstacles. Look at the last part of verse 2. We saw that star in the east and have come to worship him. They came to worship him. Do you know what the word worship means? It means to bow down. Hey, I'm going to church this morning. Well, really, what are you going to do there? Well, I'm going to sing songs. I'm going to see my friends. I'm going to listen, hopefully, to a somewhat interesting and entertaining talk. And then we're going to go to lunch. What do you call that? Worship? Yeah, sort of. The word worship means to bow down, to prostrate oneself before God. That's what is the essence of worship. It is all about surrender. Look at verse 11. After coming into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell to the ground and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They bowed to the ground. They surrendered to the Lord. They came to worship him. Now, interesting thing, surrender resulted in giving. Surrender resulted in giving. And they didn't just grab a wad of 5 $1 bills, fold it in half, and toss it in the offering plate so it looked like more money. No. They gave gifts worthy fit for a king. Gold, frankincense, myrrh. And I would argue their gifts reflected their surrender. The depth of their surrender resulted in the depth of their giving. And just an interesting note, God's very practical. Now, if you know the story, and we looked at this chapter of the story last Sunday, there's going to be a bounty put on this child's head. They had to get out of Dodge. Their business is back in Nazareth. They apparently rented a house in which to live. But they got to get out of Dodge. How are they going to pay for a trip to Egypt? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Probably paid the trip and paid the bills while they were there before they came back home. God doesn't waste stuff. Surrender resulted in giving. And it always does. When we surrender, we give. I read about a Korean family in South Korea who were poor farmers. And they didn't live in the city, and they didn't have a job in the city. They lived by their farmland. They were very poor. They didn't have a lot. They only had one ox that they used to pull the very old-fashioned plow to till the fields. Oh, they got 2 oxes. It was a better family. They went to church, and their church was blowing and going. There has been, I don't know if you're aware of this, there's been a revival going on in Korea now for over 30 years. People are being saved. Some of the largest churches in the world are in South Korea. The others are in Brazil. I digress. Anyway, this church, blowing and going, winning people to Jesus, baptizing them, discipling them, they outgrew their space. They needed more space. It rains, it's cold in Korea, it's an interesting place. Well, anyway, so they began a building program. Well, this family didn't have anything to give. So after a lot of prayer, they sold the ox and brought the money to the church. Now, when the church members found out what they'd done, they said, no, that sacrifice is too great. I love their response. They said, no, no. We are just grateful that we had something to give to our God. I bet you they met God in that gift. Determined worshipers overcome obstacles, surrender their lives, and thirdly, determined worshipers experience God. They experience God. And that's kind of the payoff, isn't it? That's kind of why we're here. We're hoping to experience God, to rub up next to God, to maybe get some guidance, some comfort, some kind of support. We want to experience God. Now, it's been a long time since I didn't go to church, but I do hang out with people who don't go to church. I get to teach at Nashville State, so I know what they're thinking. If you invite them to church, or maybe they're driving by on a Sunday morning and they see the lighted sign, and they think, how can going to an old building and singing dusty old songs out of a dusty old songbook, listening to a dusty old preacher without any hair give a talk, how can any of that help me meet God? The funny thing is, God can use anything to reveal Himself. He can use old songs out of an old songbook, or new songs from Chris Tomlin, or Building 429. He can use a freshly minted preacher just right out of seminary, or one on whom the luster and the shine is kind of worn off a little bit. Why, God even used a star in the sky. Look at verses 9 and 10. After hearing the king, they, the Magi, went their way, and the star which they had seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Now, pages have been written about what that thing was that the wise men followed. Some people say it was a supernatural light in the sky, kind of like a beacon. And that's possible. I mean, you are aware, if you go read Genesis 1, God created light before He created the sun and the stars. So it could have been a supernatural light. It could have been an angel. The angels are often referred to as stars. It could have been an angel that was guiding them. It could have been, a comet. There are records that somewhere around 2 BC, between 2 and 4 BC, there was a comet that could be seen over Palestine. Bottom line, we don't know what it was. But whatever it was, when the wise men saw it, God spoke. God guided. And when they left Jerusalem, there it was. And the Bible says they were able to follow it to where they found the child. So they met God. God guided them. They rubbed up against God. And that's what we're hoping to do. To rub up against God. To feel God. But sometimes it's not just a feeling. Sometimes God actually speaks. Look at verse 12. And having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way. God spoke to them. Talk about experiencing God. God ever speak to you? Don't do that. You know that's wrong. Or, good job, I'm really proud of you. Or, leave your money where it is. The stock market's going to come back. Or, I know that job is scary, but I want you to do it. You can do it. God speaks to us in so many ways. God spoke to me in a big way at a deacons meeting last spring. Our offerings were back up and we had a surplus, and I really wanted to resume our car care ministry. It's such a great evangelism tool and a way to reach out to people who don't go to anybody's church. It gets us into all the apartments all around this area. Well, as we talked, the question was raised whether or not the church really bought in. Not just to car care, but to whatever it was we were doing. And so the conversation went from doing something to why are we doing it? From an activity to vision. And God began to lay on my heart that our church needed a vision, a dream, a goal for the next 10 years, 20 years. And I've always resisted that. It's always seemed presumptuous to me. Now, I understand in business when the CEO steps up and says, this is our vision for 2018, or this is our vision for the next 20 years. But I've always felt like it's presumptuous for a man to step up and say, this is what God says our vision needs to be. Now, people do it, and I don't mean to criticize them, but I have never felt comfortable doing it. But God was saying, we need a vision. You know what God did? Led me to a book that explained how to get a team of leaders together to find together God's dream, God's vision. And then He provided, over and above our tithes and offerings, He provided the monies to buy a book for every one of my leaders who was going to come to the meeting. He provided money for the meeting itself. He guided me as I've never done a meeting like this. He guided me as I planned the meeting. He guided the meeting. And when that 7-hour meeting was done, we had a dream, a vision, a plan for the next 7 years. Determined worshipers, experience God. Are you looking for God today? You know, the cool thing about God is, long before we decide to start looking for Him, He has already been looking for us. He's already been looking for us. You know, Jesus told that awesome parable. The son that wished his dad was dead and asked for his inheritance and ran off and spent it all on loose living. And then he comes back. The whole time, Dad is standing on the front porch looking. Because when the son comes around the lane and turns down into the cul-de-sac where the house is, Father's standing on the porch, already watching for him, and jumps off the porch and runs to meet his son. God's already looking for us. For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son. But God demonstrates His love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, while we were yet His enemies, Christ died. He's already looking. Determined worshipers who overcome obstacles and surrender their lives will experience God. In fact, that's God's promise. Through Jeremiah the prophet, in Jeremiah 29, verse 13, He said, you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. Let's pray. Father, thank You that You're here. Thank You that when we finally get around to turning to You, You have already turned to us. When we finally remember You, we discover You've never forgotten us. And when we finally decide to surrender to Your plan, we discover Your plan's better than our plan, makes better sense, fits who we are, much better than we could have ever imagined on our own. You are an amazing, amazing God. Father, pray that each person here today with a different need, a different concern, will meet You where she is, where he is, with the ache healed, the fear quenched, the sin confronted and confessed. We are in great need of You, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. 2 invitations. Invitation 1, it's all about surrender. If you've never surrendered your life to Jesus, kind of running the show yourself, never come to a point where you've said, I can't save myself, God, I need You to save me. We use the prayer, God, I disobey You, I don't want to do that stuff anymore. Jesus, come into my life, be my boss, and save me. If you've never come to a point in your life where you've done that, I invite you to do it today. I invite you to do it. you come down, we'll pray together. I'm going to be here a little bit after worship. There are a couple things I need to do. Be glad to talk to you and answer your questions. I'm going to be gone next week, but when I get back, I would love to meet you at McDonald's and we can drink Coke and eat French fries and talk about the Lord. But if you're looking for God, find Him through Jesus. That's the only way. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. So you find Him through Jesus. If you've not come to God through Jesus, my invitation is that you do that. Second invitation is more general. We need to surrender. We need to surrender. There are places in all our lives where we're saying, oh, God, I don't want to do that. We need to surrender. We know what it is. Surrender. Let's stand together and sing. I guess it doesn't have the same ring. We three magi of Orient are. It doesn't quite work. So we'll sing about the three kings and the offerings they brought. Let's sing. Song number 113. We three kings of Orient are. It was Jesus' death on the cross that gave his birth meaning. We remember the beginning of the incarnation, God come in flesh, not because there were angels and shepherds, kings from the east, but because Christ rose from the dead, and his death had eternal impact on creation. So we come to celebrate the Lord's Supper. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 11, 23 and following, "For I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, in the night in which he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way, he took the cup also after supper, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often, Paul said, as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.'" The prophets looked forward to his coming. They looked forward to his death. Isaiah had an inkling of what was coming. David spoke words that were prescient of what would happen to the Son of God. But they also look forward to his birth when we celebrate in this season. In Isaiah 9, "For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this." Tears are falling, hearts are breaking. How we need to hear from God. You've been promised, we've been waiting. Welcome, Holy Child. Welcome, Holy Child. Hope that you don't mind a manger. How I wish we would have known, but long awaited, holy stranger, make yourself at home. Please make yourself